Have you ever noticed how some people can enter any environment and instantly command respect without needing to say a word? It's not about financial power, it's not about physical beauty, it's not about speaking loudly or making eloquent speeches. It's something much deeper and much more powerful. It's about presence. It's about the energy you radiate even before uttering a single syllable. And what if I told you that there is a fictional character who mastered this art so masterfully that his lessons can completely transform the way you are perceived in the real world? I'm talking about the Dark Knight, the Batman, the one who built an empire of respect primarily using silence as his greatest weapon. Today, we are going to dive into 5 fundamental lessons that this character teaches us about how to be respected without saying a word, and how Stoic wisdom validates each of these principles. Get ready, because what you are going to learn here has the potential to revolutionize your social interactions, your professional relationships, and even the way you see yourself. The first thing we need to understand is that genuine respect is never earned through pleading or exaggerated displays. True respect arises from silent authority, that presence that doesn't need to justify itself because it simply is. The Batman built his entire identity on this principle. He doesn't show up making speeches about justice. He doesn't explain his intentions. He doesn't try to convince anyone of his worth. He simply appears, and his mere presence communicates everything that needs to be said. That is real power. That is authentic magnetism. And the good news is that you can develop this too, regardless of where you are now in your personal journey. We live in an era of excess. Excess of information, excess of words, excess of desperate self-promotion. Everyone is shouting to be heard. Everyone is trying to prove their worth through loud and constant demonstrations. But here's the secret that few understand. In a world full of noise, silence becomes the most powerful tool. When everyone is talking, those who remain silent and simply observe automatically stand out. When everyone is desperately promoting themselves, those who simply demonstrate competence through controlled actions capture all the attention. The Dark Knight understood this from the beginning. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone because his actions spoke volumes that his words could never reach. Stoic wisdom, developed over 2,000 years ago by the great thinkers of antiquity, had already identified this fundamental principle. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome and Stoic philosopher, wrote in his meditations that it is not words that define a man, but rather his actions and his ability to maintain composure in the face of chaos. Epictetus taught that true power lies in self-control, not in the ability to control others through verbal manipulation. Seneca preached that silent dignity is worth more than 1,000 eloquent speeches. All these masters of ancient philosophy understood something that the modern world has forgotten. Being respected without saying a word is the highest form of personal authority. But how exactly does this work in practice? How can you apply these lessons in your real life to create that kind of magnetic presence that naturally attracts respect? That is exactly what we are going to explore in the 5 lessons we extracted from the way the Batman operates. Each of these lessons is a key that opens a different door on the path to being respected without saying a word. And the most fascinating part is that all of them are deeply aligned with the Stoic principles that have stood the test of time and remain as relevant today as they were in ancient Rome. The first fundamental lesson that the Dark Knight teaches us is about the absolute mastery of body language. Observe how he moves, how he positions himself, how each gesture is calculated and deliberate. There are no nervous movements, there is no restlessness, there is no need to fill the space with unnecessary action. Every movement has purpose, every posture communicates authority, every gaze conveys unwavering determination. This is not an accident, it is intentional design. The Batman understood that the body speaks a much more primitive and powerful language than words. Our reptilian brain, the oldest part of our mind responsible for assessing threats and social hierarchies, responds much more intensely to nonverbal signals than to anything that comes out of our mouths. When you master your body language, you are communicating directly with that primitive part of the brains of those around you. You are transmitting messages of confidence, competence, and authority without needing to articulate a single phrase. An upright posture communicates self-confidence. Firm but non-aggressive eye contact demonstrates presence and absence of fear. Controlled and deliberate movements signal that you have mastery over yourself. And here's the crucial principle. If you do not have control over your own body, how could anyone trust that you have control over any other situation? Respect begins with personal control, and personal control first manifests through the body. The Stoics called this sophrosyne, a Greek word that means self-mastery or temperance. They believe that a truly wise man is one who has complete control over his physical and emotional reactions. Marcus Aurelius practiced daily exercises of body awareness, observing his own reactions and training to maintain composure even in the most challenging situations. Epictetus taught his students to notice the first signs of agitation in their bodies and to consciously calm those impulses before they manifested externally. This ancient practice of bodily mastery is exactly what we see materialized in the Dark Knight. But don't be fooled into thinking that this is about repressing emotions or becoming cold and distant. It is exactly the opposite. It is about having enough control over your reactions to consciously choose how you want to present yourself to the world. It is about not being a slave to your nervous impulses, your social anxieties, your unconscious fears that manifest through restless gestures and submissive posture. When you develop this level of awareness and bodily control, you automatically project a presence that people recognize as natural authority. They may not know exactly why they respect you, but they do, because their deepest instincts identify in you someone who has mastery over themselves. The second powerful lesson we learn by observing the Batman is about the strategic use of silence. In his universe, pauses speak louder than any monologue. When he interrogates criminals, it is not the number of questions that breaks their resistance. It is the heavy silence that settles after each answer. This silence creates discomfort, tension, and forces the other person to fill the void, often revealing much more than they intended. In real life, this principle is equally powerful. We live in a society where there is an irrational fear of silence. People feel a compulsive need to fill every pause with words, as if silence were something negative that needs to be eliminated. But here's the truth that few understand. Silence is where true power resides. When you feel comfortable with silence, when you do not have a desperate need to fill every second with conversation, you automatically demonstrate an inner strength that is extremely magnetic. Think about it for a moment. Who are the most desperate people in any social interaction? They are the ones who cannot stop talking, who constantly interrupt, who fear that a second of silence will expose their inadequacy. Now think about the people you respect the most. They are probably the ones who speak less but say more, those who choose their words carefully, those who let silence do the heavy lifting of communication. The Dark Knight uses silence as a psychological tool. He knows that when he simply looks at someone without saying anything, that person's mind begins to work against itself. Silence creates space for projection. People start to imagine what he is thinking. They begin to question their own positions. They start to feel the need to justify or explain themselves. And all of this happens without him needing to say a single word. This is mastery in nonverbal communication. This is Stoic wisdom applied in practice. Seneca wrote extensively about the value of silence in his letters. He argued that most people talk too much because they fear appearing ignorant if they remain silent. But this is an inverted understanding of reality. In fact, the more you talk, the more opportunities you give to reveal your ignorance. Silence, on the other hand, allows you to observe, learn, and respond only when you have something truly valuable to contribute. The Stoics viewed silence not as an absence of communication, but as the highest form of it. It is the demonstration that you have enough control over your ego not to need to constantly validate your existence through words. Applying this lesson requires conscious practice. Start by paying attention to how many times you speak, just to fill the silence. How many times you interrupt others because you can't hold on to a thought. How many times you keep talking, even when you've said everything that needs to be said. Once you develop awareness of these patterns, you can begin to deliberately create pauses in your conversations. When someone asks a question, pause for 2 seconds before responding. When you finish speaking, resist the urge to continue. Let the silence exist. Observe how people react. You will notice that they pay much more attention to what you say when you speak less. Your words gain weight, your presence becomes more impactful, and all of this happens because you have learned to be respected without saying a word. The third crucial lesson we extract from the Dark Knight is about meticulous preparation. One of the most striking characteristics of this character is that he never enters any situation unprepared. He studies every scenario, anticipates every possibility, prepares contingencies for contingencies. This deep preparation manifests as an unshakable calm when action actually takes place. While everyone around is in a panic, he remains serene because he has already visualized 1,000 versions of that moment and knows exactly how to respond. This serenity amidst chaos is what communicates authority without words. People naturally gravitate towards those who seem to have control of the situation, and apparent control comes from invisible preparation. In Stoic philosophy, this is known as premeditatio malorum, the practice of visualizing in advance everything that could go wrong. Marcus Aurelius would start each day imagining all the difficulties he might encounter, all the difficult people he might interact with, all the challenges that could arise. This practice was not pessimism, it was psychological preparation. By mentally rehearsing these scenarios in advance, he became immune to shock and emotional reaction when they actually occurred. He maintained composure not because nothing affected him, but because he had already emotionally processed that possibility before it materialized. The Dark Knight applies this Stoic principle religiously. Before each mission, he studies building plans, behavior patterns, criminal histories, escape routes, and structural vulnerabilities. He mentally rehearses dozens of versions of how events might unfold. When he finally acts, this preparation translates into precise movements, quick decisions, and an aura of total control. The people around him perceive this quality and automatically recognize him as the leader of the situation. No one questions his authority because his preparation manifests as unquestionable competence. How can you apply this in your life? Start by identifying the situations that make you feel most anxious or insecure. Important meetings, difficult conversations, public presentations, social gatherings where you feel uncomfortable. For each of these situations, take time for mental preparation. Visualize the environment, anticipate questions that may arise, prepare responses to likely objections. Imagine different versions of how the interaction may unfold. The more you mentally visualize these scenarios, the less emotional impact they have when they actually happen. You enter these situations with a calmness that people perceive as natural confidence. And confidence without arrogance is one of the greatest generators of respect that exists. The fourth fundamental lesson from the Dark Knight is about unshakable identity. One of the most impressive characteristics of this character is that he never breaks character. He is fully committed to the identity he has built, and this absolute dedication is what makes his presence so impactful. There is no inconsistency between what he projects and what he is. There is no misalignment between his external image and his internal structure. This total coherence is what allows him to be respected without saying a word, because people instinctively recognize authenticity even when they cannot articulate exactly what they are perceiving. In the real world, one of the greatest sources of insecurity and lack of presence comes from identity inconsistency. People try to be different versions of themselves depending on the context, adapting their personality to please different groups, changing their opinions to avoid conflict, suppressing aspects of who they really are to fit social expectations. This internal fragmentation creates a dispersed energy that people subconsciously perceive as weakness. When you do not know exactly who you are, when you change your identity like clothes depending on the situation, you convey insecurity, even if your words say otherwise. The Dark Knight teaches us that true power comes from defining who you are and then living that definition unshakably. This does not mean rigidity or refusal to evolve. It means having clarity about your fundamental values, your non-negotiable principles, the code by which you operate. When you have this clarity and live it consistently, you project a solidity that makes people respect you automatically. They may not agree with you, they may not like your choices, but they respect the integrity of someone who knows who they are and does not apologize for it. The Stoics called this living according to nature, which in their philosophy meant living according to your rational and virtuous nature. Epictetus taught that true freedom comes from completely aligning your external actions with your internal principles. When there is this congruence, you become unperturbed because there is no internal conflict. You do not spend mental energy trying to remember which version of yourself you need to present in each situation. You simply are consistently in all contexts. And this consistency is magnetically attractive to other human beings. To develop this quality, you first need to do the internal work of defining your fundamental values. Take time to really reflect on what is non-negotiable for you. What are the principles for which you are willing to pay a social or professional price? What are the characteristics you want to define how you navigate the world? Once you have clarity on this, the next step is to align your daily actions with these values. When a conflict arises between social comfort and your principles, choose your principles. When an opportunity for gain arises that violates your values, decline. Each time you make these choices, you strengthen your identity and increase the solidity of your presence. The fifth and final lesson that the Dark Knight teaches us is about symbolism and visual impression. He understood from the beginning that appearance matters, not out of vanity, but because humans are visual creatures who make instant judgments based on what they see. He deliberately chose an image that communicates exactly what he wants to convey: strength, mystery, intimidation, authority. Every element of his visual was strategically thought out to create a specific psychological impact. The cape that enhances his silhouette, the pointed ears that create an intimidating shape, the dark colors that make him seem to emerge from the shadows. Nothing is accidental. Everything is intentional, designed to be respected without saying a word. This does not mean you need to wear a costume, but it means you need to be intentional about how you present yourself visually to the world. The way you dress, how you groom yourself, how you take care of your physical appearance, all of this communicates messages before you even open your mouth. A common mistake many people make is thinking that taking care of appearance is superficial or vain. But the truth is that neglecting your visual presentation communicates that you do not respect yourself enough to make the effort. And if you do not respect yourself, why should anyone else? The Stoics were not against taking care of appearance. Marcus Aurelius, even as an emperor and philosopher, kept his toga immaculate and his presentation dignified. He understood that his external appearance was part of how he communicated the values of the empire. Seneca wrote about the importance of elegant simplicity, arguing that you should dress appropriately without falling into the excess of vanity. The point is not to impress through ostentation, but to communicate through careful presentation that you have respect for yourself and for the situation. Applying this lesson requires you to honestly assess how your current visual presentation is serving your goals. Are you dressing in a way that communicates the authority you want to have? Does your physical appearance reflect the level of self-discipline you are cultivating internally? Is your visual style aligned with the identity you have defined for yourself? If there are misalignments, correct them. Invest in clothes that make you feel confident. Develop a personal care routine that you maintain consistently. Pay attention to details because details communicate that you care. When you show up impeccably presented, you are already being respected without saying a word because your appearance communicates that you take yourself seriously. These 5 lessons from the Dark Knight, all deeply aligned with Stoic wisdom, form a complete system for developing magnetic presence and being respected without saying a word. Mastery of body language gives you control over how you are perceived physically. Strategic use of silence gives psychological power in interactions. Meticulous preparation gives you serenity in chaos. Unshakable identity gives you solidity of character. And visual symbolism gives you immediate impact. When you integrate these 5 lessons into your life, you transform into someone who naturally commands respect. Not because they ask for it or demand it, but simply because they are. The journey to embody these qualities requires dedication and consistent practice. But the results are transformative. You begin to notice that people treat you differently, listen to you more attentively, seek you out for leadership, and respect you even when they disagree with you. And all of this happens not because you changed what you say, but because you transformed who you are and how you present yourself to the world. This is the true power of Stoic wisdom, applied through the lessons of the Batman. The ability to be respected without saying a word, simply through the strength of your authentic and intentionally cultivated presence.